This is part 43 of my series on my Engaged Model Railway project. Previous parts cover the project from its inception through the creation of the baseboard, selection and laying of track, building of scenic items, obtaining rolling stock, etc. The project is ongoing. This part covers a model of a Ransomes Rapier 45-ton breakdown crane from Osborns. First I'll go over some details of this rather special model, and then we'll see some running on my layout. I've always been rather interested in cranes. The first ever Christmas present I requested when I was about 3 or 4 years old was a big crane and lorry, and naturally this interest intersects with my interest in railways to produce a particular fascination with railway breakdown cranes. I was looking around to see what was available in N-gauge in the way of breakdown cranes that might be suitable for my prototype of LMS operations in the British Midlands in the 1930s. I looked at various models that might have somewhat approximated, but they weren't very close, and then I came across this model, which is produced by Osborns, link in description below. This is actually a model of one of the 45-ton cranes that were ordered from Ransomes Rapier by the Great Western Railway around 1940, but in general it is very similar indeed to the 36-ton cranes, later upgraded to 40-ton, that were ordered by from Ransomes Rapier by the LMS in 1931. I don't think there was any way I was going to get closer to a breakdown crane appropriate for the LMS in the 1930s. This model from Osborns is available in 3 different colour finishes: black as used in early BR days, red as used in later BR days, and these cranes continued in use well towards the end of British Railways, and grey as originally used by the Great Western Railway. I ordered the grey version as being closest to something appropriate for the LMS. Naturally enough, being a complex, specially made small run model, this is not cheap, about £150, plus for me shipping to Canada. Still, it's certainly something very special. So here is the box as it arrived. According to the box, it seems that a southern version was also available, or at least considered, but I've not seen any pictures of that one. The packaging protected the necessarily delicate model very well. I was, however, somewhat disappointed that this very special and expensive model didn't come with any documentation at all. I would have hoped for a bit about the prototype and some information about the model itself. But other than the labelling on the box, no writing at all came with it. I was very cautious even about taking this model out of the box, as it is very delicate. I believe most of the main parts are 3D printed. Osborns did, I believe, originally announce this item as a kit, but eventually it went on sale as a ready-to-run model, for which I have to say I'm grateful. I do like building things from kits, but it looks as though the assembly of this crane would be extremely tricky, especially the rigging of the cables. The cables are done with what appears to be nylon fishing line, catching the light here and looking white or silver, but basically translucent. This is not exactly the ideal material in terms of appearance, but I can see that it would have been extremely challenging to find anything else that would work. The model consists of 4 pieces of rolling stock which go together to produce the crane as it would run in a breakdown train. There is, of course, the main crane itself, which was steam-driven and extremely heavy. Its internal steam engine was fired and used to operate the crane itself, but it didn't drive the wheels, and the crane was always pulled by a locomotive. On either side of the crane are load-relieving bogies. These are based on the original Stokes design. They are used to distribute the weight of the crane over more axles to reduce the axle loading, so that the crane can be taken to most parts of the rail network. The load-relieving bogies have integrated jacks and gauges for measuring the weight taken. When the crane is to be moved on the rails, the jacks in the bogies are used to take part of the weight of the main crane onto each bogie, carefully measuring this using gauges. This spreads the weight across the axles of the bogies as well as those of the main crane. The 4th piece of rolling stock is the jib wagon, on which the jib of the crane rests for transport. There are also toolboxes mounted on this wagon. The individual pieces of this model are not intended to run separately. The whole is intended to be railed and run together. The model seems to be very well done. although it could probably be improved with some additional detail painting. Not sure if I'm going to try, however. As it comes, the detail painting is basically limited to picking out some controls and gauges in white. The 4 pieces together make a combined model which is about 7.5 inches long. Here's a close-up of the front load relieving bogie. And here's the back one. The curved white piece with the grey pointer represents the gauge used to show how much weight was being taken by the bogie through the use of the jack, which would lift the main crane through the special coupling seen at left here. Here's a close-up of the main crane itself. As noted, this was steam operated with its own firebox and boiler. And here's a close-up of the jib wagon with the jib resting on it. Toolboxes at right. And here's a view back along the jib of the crane. Note Rapier inscribed on the end of the jib. So, I got the crane onto the tracks behind a current production Graham Farish Ginty tank engine. It's a rather tricky item to rail as it's longer than my railing tools, and of course it is important to get all of the wheels properly onto the rails. Once I got it properly railed, I was pleased to find that the crane ran well. Not easy to accomplish for such a large, complex model. The jib does shift from side to side on the jib wagon as the crane goes round corners. This would seem to be inevitable, and the design seems to allow for this quite successfully. I do wonder a bit how prototypical all of this is. I think some compromises must have been made to get the model to run in N-gauge. It does indeed run quite flexibly. It showed no problems even with the tightest curves on my layout, which are 11-inch radius. The jib slides from side to side on the horizontal bar on which it rests on the jib wagon, and stops at either end prevent it from coming right off. Here's the crane going out of Colville Station. And again up the curved gradient to the viaduct. And here's a close-up crossing the viaduct. And here's the crane parked in a siding after its first running tests. Behind it is the little Lone Star die-cast crane, quite a contrast. Now let's see some video of the crane running on the layout. Okay, let's see if we can see this Ransomes and Rapier crane from Osborn running on the layout. So I've got it with a little breakdown train in a siding. So we'll bring out a loco to go and get it. And we're going to use the Graham Farish Ginty power towards the little house. That little house, the control house on the... There we go. Turntable off. Turntable round to the access track. You can also see here the turntable, how it is after the latest revisions. Power points, yes, we should be good to go. Bring the Ginty out of the yard. Ginty goes backwards fine. No worries about the Ginty going backwards. It's an 060 tank engine. It's quite happy to run backwards. And we'll stop him there because we're going to take him down famous last lines. He isn't quite stopping because there's too much power going through. And we're going to take him onto the outer line because that's where the siding with the breakdown train is. So now we're going to try and run him, taking him the right way, yes. We're going to try and run him over the crossover onto the outer line. There we go. We'll shut down the inner line for a moment. And we'll reverse him round. Nice little engine, very nice little engine, this current production Graham Farish not currently set, so we'll set the point to where the breakdown train is. Now the problem with this end of the network is I can't see what I'm doing because it's behind the viaduct, the raised track. Did I get a coupling there? Yes, I think so. So here we go. The breakdown train is coming out of the siding. And it's out of the siding. The siding can be closed. And we'll stop it there. Can you see it in that camera? Yes, more or less, I guess. So there you go. And it does run, you'd be surprised, it runs fairly successfully. I mean, you've got to be a little bit careful you don't derail things, but famous last words, and now it's decided to go to sleep. There we go. Just clean that section of track because it was prone to having dead spots. We've got the Ransomes Rapier crane itself, and then an LMS box van and a Suburban brake to make. I did reset that point, didn't I? Yes, I don't want to run into that and derail. We'll stop there again for a minute. We'll take him round onto the inner line, and then I'll perhaps see if I can adjust the camera so you can see a bit more of a close-up. I'm going to try and take him across, take this whole breakdown train across the, see if we can take it across the crossover onto the inner zone. Changes sound, of course, when it goes to the inner zone. Shut the crosswalk. So as you can see, I mean, this Ransomes Rapier crane from Osborns is a very complex model, but it will in fact run quite well. Oh dear, well, I lost my coupling there because I never did check that coupling manually. Probably not going to be able to recouple like that, are we? No. Oh no, it's got the engine. Oh dear. Well, I mean, I was relying on a coupling that was made automatically in a siding, which was a bit optimistic, frankly, let's face it. Is it coupled now enough to get it up the hill? No. I'm going to have to go around there and couple it manually, I think. It's not. No, that's not a good idea. I need to go around there and couple it manually. I should have checked it manually when it first came round in front of me. Actually, oddly enough, I think the problem is just that the front coupling on the crane is a bit prone to sticking up the famous last words. Whoops, maybe not railed right. Yeah, it's a little prone to sticking up in the air, that front coupling. I'm not even sure how well it's coupled now. Oddly enough, for such a fancy complex model, that coupling is just a little prone to sticking up in the air. Oh, of course I'm now trying to pull the thing up a fairly steep gradient. Anyway. Oh dear. Have I not got enough power on there? I just thought I did, but maybe not. No, I guess I just didn't have enough power to pull it there, and it's wheel slipping now. I've actually had it up here before. Oh. Well, I'm not demonstrating its facility here very well because it isn't working very well, but what can you do? I have a feeling I've got it a bit derailed here, haven't I? Yes. Okay, yes, I have. I've got it derailed. I probably derailed the front of that. It is rather fiddly, to say the least. You know, it's a very complex piece of kit. We do not have everything properly aligned. Oops. Still good. Okay. I think that's all aligned. There's a lot of sets of wheels here. So you've got 4 on here, 4 on here. I'm not even sure how many you've got on there. And I don't think I want to lift it up to look now, but there are a lot of wheels on there to get. This is just a regular coach with 2 bogies. Okay. Let's try one more time. See this? For some reason this front, that front coupling just does not want to sit down very well. Well, let's try again. It's still not the world's best coupling, frankly. See, this is still... In general, the crane goes around curves and points quite well. We'll give him a little bit more power here, coming up here, so we don't get stuck on the gradient this time, although in all fairness, I think that was probably because I partially derailed the crane before. I'm just trying to sort of center it there for you. Okay, you know what, I'm going to take a little break here and we'll I'm going to bring this camera in a bit for a bit more of a close-up. Okay, well I don't know entirely how well that's going to work now because this camera isn't the world's best camera for taking video, really, the one I'm using on the right there with the Olympus. It's a nice little camera for taking pictures, but it's not, you know, principally a video camera. And it's auto-focusing, and sometimes it tends to auto-focus on the wrong thing, but we'll see. Oh, we're going backwards still, I haven't changed the direction. Let's see if we can go around again. Come back to there. Now I'm going around the inner loop here, which has some 11-inch curves on it. So, you know, the outer loop is like 13 3/8, but there are some of these curves on this inner loop are 11-inch curves. So, you know, really for such a long, complex thing, it does pretty well. You need to give it a bit more power coming up. Oh yeah, I have tried to fix that coupling. Let's see if we can get it up the incline now. There we go. last words. I just struggle a bit to get that front coupling. And you've basically got, you know, your 4 pieces of. Now, of course, as the crane goes around the corner, the jib tends to move from side to side here on the jib wagon, but that's allowed for, so that of itself should not cause problems. I'm not optimistic about getting it up that incline with that coupling. I don't know. I just now I think it's the coupling for some reason seems to be the coupling on the crane seems to be a little higher than the coupling on the Ginty, and it's just hard to get a really good solid couple there. Alright, since I was having trouble getting the coupling to hold going up the gradient there, I've given up for the moment. I'm just going to try and run the thing. You can see where the jib goes from side to side here. As it goes around the curves, basically that ends up moving. But anyway, let's take it round the outside, which is essentially flat. Let's close the crossover so it doesn't go back inside. And it should get round here without a problem, hopefully. It's just, the coupling on the crane is just, on the front of the crane is just a little higher than the coupling on the Ginty, and it doesn't create a very good grip, and it can't quite hold going up the incline there. Okay, so hold up here on the flat. Let's try and take it very slowly here as we come in, and you can see, there we go. Famous last word, stopped it slightly too soon. Oh well. Actually, it barely fits into the camera when it's this close, doesn't it? Anyway, there you go. Something of a demonstration of the Ransomes Rapier crane running on the layout with, as usual, somewhat mixed success. But really, I wouldn't complain about this. I mean, for something so complex, it really runs very well on the whole. Alright, just as a comparison, let's see if we can see the other breakdown train running. Famous last words. Now, this is a bit of a contrast in detail and cost. And this crane cost me next to nothing. It came in a $10 lot of sorted Lone Star stuff. It's an old Lone Star crane, which ridiculously claims to be a 100-ton crane, although that Ransomes Rapier one is a 45-ton crane. There you go. That's the Lone Star crane being pulled by. Now that's also a Ginty. And if you've got sharp eyes, you'll notice that it's rather larger than the other one, so one or other of them is not quite to scale. They're both actually Graham Farish Ginties. This is an older Graham Farish Ginty in LMS Crimson. The other's the current production. I think it's, well, still currently for sale anyway. Graham Farish. Just setting the point so he doesn't hit a point set against him going round there, which he would otherwise because we just brought him out of the siding. So there you go. Now that crane tends to rock whenever it goes over a point or anything, but because it's such a heavy metal piece, although it rocks, famous last words, although it rocks, it generally doesn't derail because it's a die-cast metal that this Lone Star crane. There you go. Quite a contrast in terms to the Ransomes Rapier, which is a sort of fine modern model and much more to scale and much more realistic. But from the well, it's not quite the sublime to the ridiculous, but it's close to the sublime to the ridiculous in terms of breakdown cranes. There you go.